At Wheels Through Time, there are hundreds of motorcycles and dozens of cars, each with a story all of their own. From the rarest antiques to the most iconic styles, we are dedicated to telling the story of these old bikes.
Post-war Harley-Davidson 45s on that end of the room. Over on this side are the pre-war, and right behind me there's 539s. It's a long story, but this is Harley 45ville at Wheels Through Time, one of every year from 29 to 52. Upstairs are all the WRs. The Army bikes are down there. But what I want to talk about today specifically is the RL motorcycle. This is a 1935 RL 2348 is the number, and it's original paint all the way down the line, very nicely accessorized. The DL model, which we talked about in our last episode on Dale's channel, was the earlier version of the DL, of the RL model, the Harley 45 model. Following the RL came the WL model. That's another story for another day, because I want to tell you specifically how Harley-Davidson, in the height of it all, in 1932, redesigned the DL and made the RL model. Now that was no small accomplishment. During the running changes we talked about on the last show, the DL model, Harley almost went broke revitalizing all the big twin model VL74s ever built. That's a huge story. They replaced every engine and every frame for every bike they built while they were remodeling the 45. But the big improvement on the RL model came in 1932, and the improvement would be the front-mounted generator. Previously, the big flaw on the DL was the vertical mounted generator. We didn't talk about it, but I'll tell you about it right now. It was a disaster. They made 2 or 3 running changes, and then in 1932, they redesigned the frame with the S-bar in the front. And now we have a perfected model. Now in 1934, they also streamlined the fenders, added some accessories. Let me tell you a little bit more about this specific 1935 Harley model RL. And by the way, it's a 200 bike. It's got 20,000 original miles on the Corbin speedometer. It is fully accessorized with a special rhino pattern seat, rhino patterned saddlebags, and it's all the original paint. It's really a great bike. If you'll remember the 16 different hand controls from the rider's eye view, well, this bike has one more. Over on the left, you have your ignition timing, your brake adjuster, your brake lever. Don't forget the horn, ignition switch, dash light, headlight, low-high beam, advance and retard, 2 speedometer resets. You got your shifter, you got your oil pump, you got your oil cap, 2 gas caps, and the last item right here is called the ride control with the 4-star knob. And listen to this. Click, click. By tightening this, it dampens these friction discs on the front fork, limiting the motion of the front fork. And I think this option was like $4.95. But 819 RLs were built in 1935, 5 color options. This one's Venetian blue. And by the way, all this pinstriping was all hand done. Now, Harley-Davidson carried the RL model only to 1936. It had the same beautiful fit and finish. It's very stylized. It was only 15 bucks cheaper than the model VL. And that's why so very few RLs were ever produced. They were expensive for the model that was being built. You could buy a much bigger bike that would actually do more things, wasn't quite as sporty. That's why only 819 were built. I think in 1936, 400 were built. But really, change was on the horizon. The knucklehead Harley-Davidson knew in 1935 that bike would be out the following year. So they really wanted to follow suit with the Harley-Davidson 45. They had the new frame with the S-bar and the front generator. How would they improve the engine? I'll tell you a little more about that next week on Dale's channel, and we're going to talk about pre-war Harley-Davidson WLs 1937 to 1942. But before I take off on this 1935 model RL and show you the starting procedure, let me tell you about one more thing. It's called the Corbin speedometer tattletale. I had the bike out last night, running around the property, had it up to 40 miles an hour. The reason I know that is the tattletale, the gold line. The white one's the speedometer, the gold one's the tattletale, and when you push the buttons, it resets it to 0. And here's how the bike starts. Turn the choke on, turn the gas on. This is a cold start, by the way. I haven't run the bike since last night. Give it a 1 and a 2 kicks on the choke. Then you turn the key on. The old girl always starts right up.